There was a time when Meghan feared silence, when the absence of voices felt like loneliness, and quiet rooms reminded Hera the headlines that used to scream her name. But now, silence had become her sanctuary. In the early mornings, she would rise before the children, step into the garden still wrapped in mist, and listen. The world was soft then, birds murmuring, leaves whispering, the ocean humming somewhere beyond the hills. She had once lived in palaces where the silence was cold and watchful, but here, it was alive, breathing, welcoming, forgiving. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sunlight touch her skin, and realized that peace was not something she had found, it was something she had created, moment by moment, choice by choice. The noise of the past had been replaced by the gentle rhythm of life. The woman who once fought to be heard now cherished the beauty of not needing to speak. Meghan had always believed in something greater than herself, not in ceremony or doctrine, but in the quiet knowing that goodness endures. During her hardest nights in the palace, she used to whisper short prayers under her breath, not asking for rescue, but for courage. Now, faith had taken a different form. It was in the steady rhythm of her breath, the laughter of her children, the kindness she extended to strangers. She no longer sought divine answers in grandeur, but in gentleness. God isn't in the noise, she once told a close friend. He's in the quiet things, the cup of tea someone brings, the hug you didn't ask for, the moment you realize you survived. Her faith was no longer borrowed from tradition, it was built from experience, and through that quiet spirituality, she found herself more connected to others than ever, not through titles or fame, but through the shared human need to be seen, to be loved, to belong. There was a mirror in Meghan's study, simple, framed in wood, unadorned. For years, she had avoided mirrors. Too often they had reflected not who she was, but what the world wanted to see. The actress, the duchess, the controversy. But now, when she looked, she saw someone entirely new, or perhaps, finally, herself. The woman who stared back was older, yes, but softer too, with eyes that carried both ache and grace. She no longer chased validation, she sought alignment. Meghan began writing again, not for fame, but for clarity, essays, journal entries, letters to her children to be read years later. In her words, she found herself healing. I used to think peace was a destination, she wrote one night, but it's a practice. Something you return to again and again until it becomes part of your breath. She smiled at her reflection, not the polished image the world once demanded, but the real, luminous stillness of a woman whole at last. As Meghan entered her 40s, she began to understand what older women had always known, that wisdom isn't something you learn, it's something you live. Time no longer frightened her, it felt like a gentle friend, whispering, "You've survived enough to know what matters." The years had stripped away illusions, the need to impress, the hunger for applause, and replaced them with gratitude. She often spent afternoons speaking with women decades older than herself, former activists, artists, mothers, widows, women who had lived entire lifetimes unseen. She listened, learning their stories, finding herself reflected in their resilience. They reminded her that beauty was not youth, it was presence. Every line on your face is a story you dared to live, one of them told her. Meghan smiled and nodded. She no longer feared aging, she welcomed it like a soft light through the window, inevitable, golden, kind. Meghan often thought about legacy, not the kind written in history books, but the one felt quietly in other people's lives. Fame fades, love doesn't. Titles pass, kindness remains. She realized that her true influence would never be measured in headlines or awards, but in the hearts she had touched. A young woman once wrote to her, "You made me feel like it's okay to start over." Another said, "Because of you, I left a toxic job." Meghan read each message slowly, smiling through tears. "That's it," she said softly. "That's enough." She didn't need monuments, her legacy was made of moments. Each act of compassion, each story shared, was a thread in the quiet tapestry of her purpose. She had walked through fire and built something gentler from its ashes. And as she tucked Archie and Lilibet into bed that night, she realized the truth of her journey. She had never needed a crown to shine, only the courage to stay kind. In the years that followed, Meghan's work became quieter, but deeper. She no longer sought to change the world loudly. She touched it gently, one heart at a time. Each month, she would visit small communities, often without fanfare, offering words of comfort, listening more than she spoke. Once, at a women's center tucked between the hills, she sat with a group of mothers who had lost their jobs during the pandemic. There were no cameras, no speeches, just shared silence and stories. Meghan listened to each woman, her eyes soft, her hands steady. When one began to cry, Meghan reached out and held her hand, not as a duchess or a public figure, but as another woman who had known what it felt like to be misunderstood, to start over. Sometimes, she said gently, you don't have to fix someone's life to change it. You just have to remind them they're not alone. That day, as she walked back to her car, the wind carried laughter from the center. The kind of laughter that only hope can make. And for Meghan, that sound was enough. Evenings were Meghan's favorite time, the hour when the lights softened and the day exhaled. Often, she and Harry would sit outside, their children already asleep, a candle flickering between them. They spoke not about the past anymore, but about meaning, what it meant to live freely, to love deeply, to let go gracefully. Do you ever miss it? Harry once asked. Meghan smiled. Sometimes I miss the idea of it, not the reality. She explained that what she missed wasn't the palace, but the purpose she once thought she had there. Now, she said, I realize purpose doesn't come from where you stand, but how you stand. They watched the stars rise in silence, their fingers intertwined. The world had painted them as rebels, but they felt more like pilgrims. Travelers who had simply chosen the harder path toward truth. The wind rustled the olive trees, carrying the scent of lavender through the night. We did the right thing, Harry whispered. Meghan looked at him, her eyes calm and certain. Wedded the brave thing, she answered. The earth had always grounded Meghan. As her life slowed, she began to see the divine in ordinary things. The way morning dew clung to petals, the hum of bees in summer, the way the ocean breathed in rhythm with her own heartbeat. She spent hours gardening, barefoot in the soil, her hands covered in earth. To her, it wasn't just a hobby, it was prayer. Every time I plant something, she once said, I'm reminded that beauty takes patience. The garden became her cathedral, sunlight her stained glass. It was there she found peace, not in applause or attention, but in the soft persistence of life continuing. She taught Archie to speak gently to plants, to say thank you when they grew. Lilibet laughed as butterflies landed on her shoulders. Meghan smiled, realizing she was teaching her children something sacred, that care is a form of faith. For her, spirituality no longer meant words spoken in churches, but gratitude whispered to the wind. When Meghan spoke publicly now, her words were few but full of meaning. In one of her rare speeches, she stood before an audience of women of all ages, her voice steady and tender. We are all walking each other home, she began. The room fell silent. She spoke not about power or privilege, but about compassion, the kind that costs nothing yet heals everything. The world teaches us to compete, she said, but our hearts were made to connect. Many women in the crowd, especially the older ones, wept quietly. They saw in her not a duchess, but a daughter, a sister, a reflection of themselves. Someone who had known pain and turned it into gentleness. It's never too late, Meghan said, to choose grace. Her speech lasted less than 10 minutes, but its echo lingered long after. Later, one elderly woman approached her and said softly, You make me proud to be a woman. Meghan held her hand and replied, You always had every reason to be. On the final evening of summer, Meghan walked alone along the beach behind her home. The waves whispered their endless song, the horizon painted in gold and rose. She had walked this same path many times, through storms, through silence, through seasons of loss and renewal. Tonight, it felt like coming home. She thought of all the versions of herself she had been, the actress, the duchess, the mother, the woman, and she smiled. They were all her, all still within her. The world would continue to talk, to interpret, to misunderstand, but she no longer needed to explain. She had learned that peace isn't about escaping the world, but carrying calm within it. The ocean breeze brushed her face, and she whispered a quiet thank you, to life, to time, to herself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the light lingered on her face, not the spotlight she once fled, but the light she had found within. It glowed softly, steadily, eternally.